Just as a point of order, I have a hard stop at 8 o'clock. If I drop off, I'm going to be that'll be an indication that I'm transferring the meeting over to Dr. Clancy, who's the deputy or the deputy chairman. Is that
Vice chair?
Vice chair.
vice chair? That's what it's called. So, moving on to the agenda, the design update.
Mark, do you want to say anything before I dive in?
No.
Okay.
Dive right in.
Just
You're gonna run the screen?
Yep.
Perfect.
All right. So we will definitely keep this brief. We have an update on where we are with the 3 design options moving forward. We've got the project goals as usual. You can read those at your leisure. Work plan update. We are here at the beginning of October. We are preparing for the 2 upcoming joint meetings here, as well as the special town meeting here. We are continuing to work on the interior space planning options. We've been meeting regularly with the working group to do that. And we have been beginning some community outreach efforts. I'll go more into detail with that.
Hey, Mary Lee,
Yeah.
Can I just jump in real quick, please?
Please
So, at our last meeting, the intent of this meeting was through the lens of what we're presenting on October 16th. So if we could, not at this very second, let Mary Lee do her thing, but essentially, this is what we're hoping to show, albeit probably a little bit more developed and taking your feedback. This is what we're hoping to show. You can see it there October 16th. So as we're going through this, if you can just continue with the lens that this is going in front of FinCom, School Building Committee, you all, and then also the last group. One more time.
Can we revisit this this holiday thing up here?
Yep.
I mean, the holiday indicates red circle, and that's not indicative of what we're seeing on the calendar.
It might just be your screen, actually. It looks, we can make it a little bit different, but they're the same Pantone color.
This right here is the holiday. That's Indigenous Peoples Day. And I just found out that my school district has no school tomorrow. So that should also be circled. But this red circle right here is we are here. This is red versus orange. We'll change the colors.
I'm talking about the up just to the right of the work plan update. You've got holiday school building committee proposed subcommittee.
Yep.
You've got holiday indicated as a red circle, and you've got a lot of red circles out here, and I don't quite understand what that means.
Those are school holidays, right?
Yeah. Indigenous Peoples Day.
Columbus Day.
I can't remember what this one is. I think that's Diwali. Then there's Veterans Day,
Veterans Day,
Thanksgiving, holiday break.
Okay, got it.
Okay, so yes, Meryl is right. The meeting on the 16th, we will be showing design updates. And then by the 23rd, we will have updated cost estimate information. That's why we have the 2 meetings right in a row there. Any other comments on this before we move on? Okay. All right, so as a comparison in terms of size, last time we met, we talked about the space reduction efforts that we had been going through, and we've gotten the new construction option down to just over 97,000. We anticipate that that is going to continue to shrink a little bit as we develop the designs. The ad reno option is a little bit smaller. The reason for that is that in the new construction areas, the additions, these are all sized to be the ideal sizes, same as the sizes that are being used in the new construction options. But in the portion of the building that we are keeping, we are sort of making the best of the existing spaces, trying to shift things around, moving interior partitions where we can. But because we're limited by the existing footprint and the existing structure, some of the spaces inside this part are a little bit undersized. That's one of the reasons that we had talked about. This was not our absolute top choice. It didn't get the top score when we did the evaluation criteria, because some parts of it were going to be tough to meet the MSBA guidelines and the district's ed plan.
Just a quick question on this, Mary Lee. I wonder if it makes sense if this is in fact the slide that goes into the presentation for the 16th, if we don't add, let's say, the previous score, just to know like what was preferred before. And I think even though this baseline, I'm not sure that 85,000, sorry, I'm just looking at it. The last square footage that most of the people saw, not the people in this meeting, but when we had all the folks in there, was like 103.
Yep.
Somehow we should reference that to show the work that's being done, that it's actually coming down from that.
Okay.
That's a good point.
And Mary Lee, just a excuse me, a point of clarification: the 85,922 square feet is the current Shaker Lane square footage with special education and pre-K. Is that correct?
Close. This would be if we took the MSBA baseline, which does not include any square footage for pre-K and does not include your district's specialty special ed spaces, and we added just those program pieces. This would be considered the absolute bare minimum that the school could be and still meet the MSBA guidelines and your program requirements. So when we're comparing these numbers here, previously we'd been comparing it to the 73,000 number, but that was never realistic because that didn't include the pre-K, it didn't include crucial special ed spaces. So when we're comparing these, it's really to this almost 86,000 square foot number.
Mm-hmm. And that's important to reinforce at our next meeting as well, because I think people walked away with the 73,845 square feet.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right.
We should probably
Yeah.
emphasize that as well. Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Okie dokie. So we have been quite busy developing actual floor plans for these options. We want to look at, these are still very conceptual floor plans. These are making sure that we have all the spaces included, that we are meeting the square footage that we're aiming for, meeting the grossing factor that we're aiming for, and using this to capture scope in the estimates. So we have not done individual labels on the plans. That's intentional. We also have not carved up some of the larger spaces like the admin spaces. It's going to be carved up into a bunch of offices and conference rooms. There's a few other pieces of program like that for now we're just putting in a block, and we'll subdivide it later during schematic design once we have an option chosen. But this is more space planning, combination, laying out early floor plan options. So on each of these, we have identified the division between the community wing and the more private academic wing. In this ad reno option, because of where the gymnasium is and the layout of the existing structure, that line is pretty far back here. We could definitely do things like add a security door here to sort of move that boundary up a little bit. Or we could have after hours access to the gymnasium only through the exterior and not here at all. And then that way we could control after hours access so that it's maybe just limited to the cafeteria, maybe the media center, so people aren't coming that far back into school. That is something that will develop further on if we, for some reason, need to continue developing this particular option. But for now, more or less, this is where the division is between the public and private. We are talking about this because part of this project is getting community support for this and really making this school a resource for the community while we're still keeping it safe for the kids. So it's an important part of all of these designs. Mark has his hand raised.
Yeah, just a quick question. I know you show it on the smaller plan with the different colors, but is it worth differentiating on the bigger conceptual plan what's existing and what's new?
You mean?
Nope,
over here. Yes.
over here, yeah.
Yes, definitely.
So what do these different scenarios mean as far as schedule and cost are concerned?
So cost, we don't know until we get the next round of estimates. And scheduling, I don't know off the top of my head. Mark, I think we had sort of talked about this. This one, the scheduling would be a little more complicated just because it involves moving people into the new portion of the building while it's still being worked on, whereas the new construction option is built completely independently of the existing school and then it's demolished. But I think in general, we've thought about the phasing of this so that the schedule is still pretty tight on this one. Mark, do you have any other?
I've been involved in some of these ad reno projects, and there's quite a bit of coordination and scheduling impacts and associated costs.
Yeah, I think that'll flush itself out, Steve, when we get the cost estimates pulled together, knowing exactly that, because there'll be some kind of a premium to pay for, I know we talked earlier in the total upgrade, that there'd be someplace to, modulars or something, which I don't think we need to do here. But when the cost estimate flushes out, we'll be able to definitely talk about that. And phasing, that's a good point on the schedule. We should talk maybe a little bit more about just adding some information on the overall schedule, getting the PSR out. But as far as the option itself, maybe we should add a little bit more information about potential phasing that might, push the schedule out a little bit. It's a good point.
Okay. Steve, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I don't want to jump the gun if you're going to talk about this later. But last meeting, you mentioned about the 100-foot buffer and how that's encroaching over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can see from this that it's actually into the school now.
Yep.
And even on the other two plans that you're showing, it's very close. I mean, you designed it so it doesn't hit now. But if that's encroaching even further, are we going to be running into problems in the next few years, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, that all of a sudden we have a water issue at a new building?
I think the answer to that changes depending on which option you're looking at. Due to the topography of the site, it's very steep in these areas where we have the lines close together. And especially up here at this option, the wetlands themselves are all the way down here. This buffer is 100 feet away from the wetlands. You can see right here, all these little polka dots, that indicates wetlands. It's really stopped right here at this corner. It might fill in a little bit here as time goes on, but it's certainly not going to get all the way up to this field. So even though the buffer might change and the buffer might go into the building after it's already built, it's not going to lead to water problems in there. Down here, sort of a similar story. It is still steep enough that wetlands are not starting to encroach up this fairly steep incline over here. It's more that the water is traveling up this direction where the topography is much more gradual. So the option that we're showing is in this area, pretty far away from the wetlands. Unlikely that there would be water issues in there. We're also doing soil studies and soil tests to really make sure of what kind of drainage situation we have, and we can study some of the long-term effects that way, but I don't see that it's likely here. This right here, because this is existing building and we're not doing an addition really anywhere close to the buffer, then what we're looking at right here is this sort of wet bowl down here that seems to be growing a little bit. And it's a pretty steep bowl going down into this area. So I think what's happened is that this area has really been where the growth in the wetland has been over time. This has just gotten maybe a little bit wetter, but it's not really rising too much because it really is just in a bowl. So I'm not a civil engineer, but I think it's unlikely that there would be water issues here in the front of the school. And then this part is being demolished, so you don't need to worry about that at all. This could be something that we will ask our civil engineer about and our landscape architect about to see if they foresee anything as well. But because the additions are back here on the back side of the building and we're not disturbing anything out here, I think we're pretty safe in this option.
But I think to maybe to answer your question, Steve, we're working with the information we have currently, and that's what we have to base our design on.
Okay. I mean, I was just wondering, once we have everything ripped up, whether we're doing this ad reno or the new additions, whether it's some type of drainage system that can be put in to help mitigate something happening in the future.
You mean drain the swamp?
Yeah.
Concom really likes
do
that
that
kind of
with
language.
Strike that from the minutes.
Our civil engineer is really good, and they do a lot of studies on stormwater management and keeping the water from running off and storing it in cisterns or doing grading to keep the water away from the building. They have a ton of different strategies that they would use regardless of which option that we choose.
Okay.
Yeah, well, the geotech will also be involved in that as well. So
yeah, yep. Did somebody else have their hand raised, or was that everybody? Okay. Any other comments on this option before we move on?
I think Kelly had his hand raised at one point.
No, I'm good, thanks. You answered my question. Thanks.
Okay.
There you go.
I do have one question.
Yes.
Since we will be talking about sustainability, can you put geothermal wells within that 100-foot buffer zone?
I'm not totally sure. That's a good question.
Because I mean, that's where the energy, I think that would be, anyway, just a question.
Yeah, we can find that out. Steve Mitchener, do you happen to know?
I don't know if it's feasible. And then the other question is, what is the appetite of Concom in building within the 100-foot? For instance, Groton is very adamant we can't get into the 50-foot. They're very, and then they'll consider stuff between 50 and 100. Yeah, we'll see what Littleton decides. What Concom, where their appetite is, and I think actually Samiotis has experience there, so they would know better. But for the purposes of here, we've been avoiding the 100-foot buffer just to to.
Well, that's for construction. Yeah, foundation work.
Yeah,
So
but that if it's an access road, anything, Concom is going to have jurisdiction on whether it's a well or anything. So we'll get back to you on the feasibility of that, but it would be a Concom question too.
Agreed. Yep. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, you need special approval from the Conservation Commission.
Yeah.
Meryl, did you have some?
Steve Moore just volunteered himself for the Sustainability Committee, I think.
I don't think so.
No? Okay, we'll circle back with you.
No.
But you seem
he's a
rather
busy guy.
interested.
He's a busy guy.
All right. By the
All
end of
right.
our meeting, we'll have you wrapped around our finger. Don't worry. So
We got to keep him chairing this. So come on.
Right.
Yeah, move along. Let's go.
moving along.
Next option. Actually, I'm going to go in a different order. I'm going to talk about the lower field option first before I go to the upper field option. So last time we talked, the focus was about how the wetlands had really grown over time and that the buffer was now all the way up here. We worked on this option, and this is a 2-story option shown here. We are able to keep it just out of the play area. It looks like it's in there a little bit, but it's going to be tweaked a little bit so that it's out of there. The construction fence would keep the construction away from the playground enough that the kids could still use that during construction. It does go up here onto this other field, and there's not really, we can continue to tweak it and maybe encroach less. But I believe that this option would mean that this upper field loses one of these diamonds. So that's just something to keep in mind when we're doing our final evaluation of these 3 options. We still would have room down here to fit baseball or softball or soccer fields. But we knew all along that this option was going to be taking away at least this field and sort of dividing the community accessible fields between what's up at the north and what's down at the south. For this option, we have the main entrance here. The drop-off loops would be built after the demolition of the existing Shaker Lane, and this would be the zone that would be used for the queuing, the car drop-off and pickup, and the bus queuing. This has the community accessible items in the middle here. The media center is upstairs, which we can still control access to the rest of the school. With it located in the center, we can put access doors on either side of the gym and have a stair. This rectangle is a stair, have a stair available so that if you want to make the media center available after hours to community groups, you could still do so. And this is the cafeteria and the gymnasium and access through the main front door, keeping all of the student areas private and segregated and able to be closed off. Any questions about this one? Steve.
Mary Lee, I think we got drafts today, the landscape, but we'll be able to incorporate some landscape plans for the next meeting, right? So folks can see the site impacts.
Yeah, and I do want to make a point about that later in this meeting. We need to reconvene with the site selection and design subcommittee, so we can talk about that towards the end of this meeting. Anything
I do
else?
have a question about this lower field. I see the first floor plan. The footprint is smaller than the second floor plan. Does the second floor have like, is it elevated above the, I mean, how does that work?
They're the same size. What you see here is there would be a roof here. The first floor is larger than the second. Like this distance from here to here is the same distance as here to here. It's actually slightly larger on the first floor because the preschool and kindergarten classrooms are larger. So we just grew those out beyond, and there would be little roof edges along the edges of these classrooms.
I would suggest for presentation purposes, if you're going to use this slide to kind of make it look like they're the same size.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think that's a weird optical illusion.
But we'll show roofs and that sort of thing that you would see on the second floor. That'll tell the story.
Yeah. Mark.
Just on a follow-up to what Steve Michener was just saying for landscaping, I know one of the biggest issues for the project is, parking and drop-off and coming from the street and all of that. Is there a chance, maybe not on this smaller plan, but by the first floor plan, just somehow showing some of the drives and the parking, just so you see where those areas are?
Yes, we got drawings from landscape architects today, so we'll be able to add that information in before the 16th.
Great. Thank you.
Anything else on this one? All right. So the upper field option here. This one is this is the one that had the highest score when we did our evaluation criteria. In this one, the main entrance is here to the south. There would be separate loops for car and bus, as well as parking spaces. I took a quick glance at the landscape architect's parking plan, and they had well over 100 parking spaces. So there's enough room for the parking spaces that are needed. This is also a 2-story option, and this, I think, has the most tightly controlled access to after-hours community events. So you come in, there's a lobby, and then right here is the cafeteria and the gymnasium. The media center is here, so this could potentially be included in the after-hours access, but the rest of the school could be easily closed off and keep it separate and safe. This one, because the community accessible parts are towards the south, they're right here. Then everything from here including this field and down the rest of the site, would be available for community use, which is a huge plus for the town of Littleton. And this is the one that we've been focusing most of our design on, but we're going to pull up the level of the other two designs before it goes out for pricing. We have been meeting with Kelly, Michelle, and some other people from Shaker Lane School and from the district, and talking about space planning of the building and how these different areas work together, how these learning dens work, how we have in here gathering space so an entire grade level can fit together and receive a lesson, maybe from an outside visitor. We have STEM spaces. It's called the Imagitorium at the existing school. So we'll have our little Imagitorium stations. And then we also have satellite media center stations. So we can really accomplish the mission of having books everywhere all throughout the school. I think, Kelly, you had your hand raised first.
Mary Lee, can you remember how much larger the gymnasium is in this model and the other model compared to the current gymnasium?
I could tell you.
I'm just trying to look at that 10,000 square foot difference and get an idea in my mind where some of that's coming from. I would imagine the gymnasium would be part of it.
Yeah, so your gymnasium is 2,600 square feet. And a standard size gymnasium is 6,000 square feet.
Thank you.
That's a big difference.
Mhm.
So I don't know where this enters into the conversation, but, you know, going from 103,000 to 97,000 square feet, or a reduction of about 6,000 square feet, does not really translate into linear dollar savings. If we're talking about $8,000 a square foot, we're not saving $48,000 or whatever it is. I mean, I think Mike can speak to this a little bit more eloquently than I can, but you know, when you reduce square footage, you don't automatically get a full savings of square foot cost.
Yeah, you're exactly right,
Yeah.
because the
Yeah, it
amount of
never
site
works
work
out.
doesn't change. It's the
HVAC, stuff
Yep.
like that.
It's
Yep.
minimal.
yeah.
Yep.
So we will be having further conversations with our cost estimator to see if we can get sort of a better calculation of how to, if we continue to squeeze the program and make it more and more efficient, we can have a better idea of how that impacts the cost of the project without having to continually go back to the estimator.
So,
But-
you know, that's where I turn it over to the, you know, the school department and the school committee. You know, when you're squeezing down the square footage, what is the, you know, what's the value of that? I mean, are you getting value for the savings?
I would say right now it's the tool that we have to control the budget, and the exercise right now, which we said we would do and we're doing as best as we can, was to look for efficiencies with actual layout. So the tools we're using now are actually laying out the building and looking to make it efficient, but also actualize the program requirements. So I think we're in a natural place to do our best effort to make the building as small as it can be. And then there are other things we can do to make it economical. You know,
But I think it would be good to get a kind of a litmus test on, you know, if we reduce it by 1,000 feet, 5,000 feet, how much are we going to actually save?
Go ahead, Steve.
we are getting an estimate. I think what this goes to, Steve, you're bringing up a good point. When we get through the agenda, we may have some time to talk about the strategy of our message at the 16th, because we have the way we've set this up, as I understand it, is we have sort of 2 points of contact with the larger group. One is to show progress in the scale of the building and what we've been doing to actually take the program and lay it on the land. The next time we meet with them will be, now we have cost information to share with you. But we do have a sense from the group that cost is very much at the front of their mind. I guess the only way to address that is we are the size of the building is decreasing, which will help the cost. It's not going to take 40 million out of the project, clearly, or 20 million. So it's too soon. It would be good to talk as a group how we want to talk about cost at the 16th.
I think before we present it to a larger audience, we want to make sure that the school department is comfortable with the reduction in square footage or the savings that we're going to realize. Right now, we have $108 million out there. If we're going to save $2 million by reducing it by 5,000 feet, I mean, does that make sense?
I think, Steve, I think that's a real good point. I mean, when we looked at the reduction of square footage.
Kelly, as you're speaking, you're muted.
Oh,
no, I can hear him.
I can hear
I
him.
can hear him.
oh, thank you.
You're
I was
good,
looking
Kelly.
at my computer thinking, oh, now what went wrong with my computer? That's good to know. When we looked at space reduction, we were pretty careful to ensure that we could meet our programmatic needs and also 21st century learning, et cetera. But you have a very valid point. If it's not going to save that much money, we would perhaps reconsider it. But I really thought the process was well done, and Michelle, feel free to chime in as well. We're happy with what we're seeing here. We had a meeting today, and we spent some time going over it in more detail, and it does meet the needs that we're looking for.
Okay, as long as you're happy with it.
Yeah,
Bob?
I think one sec. I know Bob's been very patient with his hand up. We've been very careful to take away square footage that we had initially put in a number and said, we think this would be a good amount. And then each one of those numbers we took a closer look at and said, do we really need this much? And what if we do a square footage per person in the room calculation? Can we tighten it down like that and still be certain that it's a comfortably sized space and not squeezed? So I would say that the reductions that we've made so far have felt pretty safe and have felt sort of like low-hanging fruit. I don't feel like there have been any big sacrifices made, and certainly no sacrifices to the educational program at this time. And I think there's still definitely room to reduce it even further as we continue the design.
All right, after 7:30, folks, just an FYI, come on.
Yep. All right, Bob.
Where would the future expansion be if needed? We're sitting right on a buffer zone on one side, and it looks like a property line on the other side.
Yep.
Where would you go out?
In this instance, it would be continued down this corridor to add another small academic wing here with a courtyard in between. So that would be on this portion of the site here.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll show that for the next presentation. We'll have that on the plan as well.
Yeah.
This is great. Thanks everybody for thinking of these things so we can have it covered for the meeting. I do think if we just pause just for a second, because we might not have time at the end, but in the middle of this, I think some of the questions coming out we might want to think about, for instance, Kelly asked about sort of what size the gym do we have now, which I think was leading to what's the that 10,000 more square foot above baseline. Perhaps, I don't know if that's too much detail for this group that would be presenting to on the 16th to give a couple bullet points of, you know, the stuff that's more that makes up that extra. If we think that would be important to put in there. I think also to consider, because Steve Moore had asked the question, you know, are we losing some square footage that the district really wanted? We need to at least talk about the process. And I think it'd be good perhaps for the, you know, Kelly, if we have a moment to sort of hand the mic to you and say what the process has been like, and that, you know, we're comfortable with the reductions in square footage, so that we know that it, because it's been, you know, multiple meetings week to week that you all have been involved. So it's not like you weren't closely, you know, involved.
Yeah, no, not a problem at all. And as I said, you know, a few minutes ago, I felt the process was thorough, and I don't feel that the decrease in the square footage to what we have here is in any way affecting what we want to see in a new school.
Okay.
Merrill?
I'm more than happy to talk about that, yeah, at the meeting.
So I just wanted to go back to the cost thing. So two things to point out are, these are the three designs that are going to our students design team cost estimator next week on the 9th. As well, we're going to have 2 cost estimates. So that's really helpful to kind of level the information. It's also going to go to Mark's team, Turner, Townsend, Harry. So we're going to have 2 cost information going next Wednesday, 2 cost estimators, essentially what you're seeing with additional information, very, very, very high level. We're still very high level in a lot of this. Then we're getting the estimates back on the 22nd, I believe. So we won't have it for the 16th, actually. So just wanted to clarify that. We'll have it on the 22nd. Hopefully we'll be able to sync up and reconcile with Turner Townsend and our estimator to kind of level the 2 estimates against each other to make sure the assumptions are the same. So that's one point I wanted to make. And then the second point is we're talking about the square footage being a lever to reduce the cost. Now, we haven't picked mechanical systems. We haven't picked site descriptions. We haven't picked materiality at this point. So yes, one of the levers to reduce cost is square footage. There's other things that we can do that haven't even been identified yet that will teeter one way or the other, depending on the information. So just wanted to put that out there, that's saying, oh, if we take a certain square footage, we're going to save this much. There's a lot that we haven't figured out yet. That's just where we are in the process, and that's typical at this point in feasibility. So I just also wanted to explain the level of detail of where we're at with that. So
Yeah, that's a good point, because the number we've been looking at is 800 and some dollars per square foot. So far, we're looking at the square foot side of it. There's a ton of stuff we can do to look at the dollar side to reduce that dollars per square foot. And that number is also just an estimate. And when we look at MSBA projects, the dollars per square foot that projects are actually coming in at are a range. So that's sort of an average. We have found that our projects in general, Studio G's projects in general, tend to be below the average of what the MSBA is seeing. So that's definitely a place that we can look for ways to save substantially.
All right, it's almost 7:40. Can we get to the sustainability stuff, please?
I'm going to run us through very quickly. All right, so let's go to the next slide. Here's the agenda. Really, the reason we're going to have the green engineer here is to talk about what the process is and the requirements of sustainability, and also the opportunities and how we might want to find champions to guide the project through that. Let's go to the next slide. So working with the MSBA and the MSBA process, it is a requirement to meet certain LEED standard and to be certified. So we'll talk about that, what that means. Let's go to the second one. And as part of that system, the MSBA gives a reward in reimbursement if the district chooses to follow some of these extra incentives. Then they can get a reimbursement by meeting the requirements of LEED in certain areas. So Eric will talk about that as well. Let's go to the next one. I think this will be a pretty short discussion of EUI and how that's a baseline to measure how efficient a building can be. And this really talks about the green engineer will be one of the consultants through schematic design in conjunction with the mechanical engineer, the electrical engineer, and the plumbing engineer, GGD, that will do the life cycle cost analysis for systems, help select the system to see what's right for this building and the opportunities for meeting sustainable goals of the district. Let's go to the next one. Then we'll explain about what LEED is and the different categories. Go to the next one. And talk a little bit about the details of the various categories and the points. Let's look at the next slide. It becomes pretty detailed in here, and that's where the district is actually going to come in to be a partner in this, and that is we will be having a sustainability workshop in December, probably late December, mid-December, with the green engineer, consultants, and also those who are selected from the district who want to participate in this. So we would expect it's probably going to be one of the people from the sustainability committee in the town, and I believe this is an opportunity to have a subcommittee for the school building committee to have participation from the district, because there's many choices on how to achieve the LEED certification, and it really starts to become choices for the district. What's the right fit for the district? So that's what we want people to start thinking about on who will be part of that, because this, late mid-December is going to be here before we know it, and we want to have those individuals identified so they can participate in this process. The other things we'll talk about are the funding and incentives. We've already started to discuss this, but there are groups. This one is called Undaunted K-12 that can work with the district to look at IRA funding incentives that are available. There are some other mass DOER incentives available. There, we are in the process. I don't know, Mark, if you have anything to say, if you've had any chance to talk to Littleton Electric, we might have a chance to connect with those folks by the 19th to see if there's any possibility for incentives. Historically, I believe Steve Marcus said that we haven't seen much participation from Littleton Electric and Water Department, but we'll certainly be asking if they'd be able to participate.
Yeah, I'll be reaching out to them soon. I got their contact information now, so we'll have a discussion.
Great. So, and then I think that wraps it up, doesn't it? Oh, sorry. There's goals here. What are the, so basically just kind of wrapping up, we just talked about if clearly net zero and geothermal wells will be discussed when we get to that point in the beginning of the first sustainable workshop, and then it's not just one stop. There'll be additional meetings with that group as we go forward in system selection. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned, mid-December we want to have those folks identified. And Steve Venuti has his hand up.
I do. So a couple of slides ago, when you talked about the incentives, just a typo on it. It should be Littleton Electric Light and Water, not Little Electric
Oh my
Light.
gosh.
Right.
Thank you for pointing that out and avoiding embarrassment for the next meeting.
And then when you talked about the extra money from the MSBA, is that
Yes.
just for this portion of the project, or is it overall you get an extra 3%?
It's overall. it's basically, so if you, let's just say, I forget, what's our reimbursement here? Are we in the
Feasibility's got it at 48% right now.
48? So,
Mhm.
so if everything was achievable in there, and I don't think we can always get the whole 4%, but it might bump the overall reimbursement up 2 to 3. It just depends on how, meeting all these requirements requires some effort, and sometimes the budget isn't able to meet all of those. So
But it's a good cost benefit. You could
for
see
sure,
what you're going to get from it and what you're spending on it.
this 1% for the for materials, low emitting materials, this sort of thing, that's a slam dunk. I mean, we can get that no problem, because that's one of our intentions anyway, for indoor air quality. So that's very doable. I think the 3% on the for the other pieces, I think, come down to system selections and what we can do there from a budget perspective.
Okay.
I think you. Go
Is
ahead.
that 3% scalable, or is it 3% or 0?
I believe it's a range,
Okay.
but I don't know for sure. I think let's say if you did net zero building, you'd probably get in 4%. You'd probably get everything.
We're
If
not
you-
doing net zero.
Yeah,
Well-
we're not a specialized community, I
No.
don't think.
So
Well,
so
you are a green community, are you not?
Yeah, we are.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't want to opt in unless we have to,
Yep.
Or you want to?
because
So-
you can't opt out.
You
So
go to
this
that
is something that will have further guidance, not just from the green engineer, but also, during the system selection with the mechanical engineers, GGD. We'll be looking at what the opportunities are and what the cost of those opportunities are. So it'll be much more granular, and there'll be much more information for making those decisions. But I do think it would be good to start thinking of some folks that would be appropriate for the subcommittee.
Yeah, can you go to that last slide, Marilee? So we're talking about it, and Meryl's already reached out to it. It's Sarah, is it Rambacher? Is her last name? Sarah, to be part of, and maybe even be a chair of a sustainability subcommittee group as part of the project. So Meryl's reached out to her. I'm going to follow up and talk to her and see if she's available. She's not available on the 16th. She said somebody may be available on October 16th. She's not going to be available, but she'll have somebody from the sustainability group be there. But she hopefully is available when we get to the meeting on December to talk about what possibilities we can have for sustainability. So we'd like a couple of other people on this committee to join the subcommittee for sustainability. If we get a minimum of 3, max of 5. So if Sarah joins, we'd like to have a couple people from this committee join as well. So if you guys can think about that, we can certainly put that together, and that'll be another group that will focus on these items and then report to this group, so we can keep the meetings within the right amount of time.
Mike, did you have your hand up?
He's volunteering.
Hey, this one's going to probably be less of a time commitment than the subcommittees, I think.
I think it's a great
Um,
subcommittee.
So I do have 2 other things to talk about, but I think that we can wait until we have this first conversation with the green engineer and sort of really understand what the time commitment for that would be before we really ask anybody to volunteer. So you've got a little bit of time to decide.
It's essential.
Right.
I think the overarching need for the subcommittee is because we're going to be talking about, as geothermal. Do we want PV panels on the roof? So these discussions are going to happen, and we can't do it in a box. We need to have the communication with this subcommittee, because otherwise we're going to loop you all into it, and that's not necessarily your wheelhouse. So we want the experts in the room who have buy-in for the with the process.
10-minute warning, 10-minute warning.
Yeah.
All right, I got
And-
two more. Go ahead.
Well,
Steve.
If I would just
Yeah.
say, it's the discussions are not going to be necessarily like, what do you want, but really opportunities of the project within what the budget is. So it's really, it's kind of like what fits for what we're doing here. Because we don't want to
Exactly.
spin our wheels with, clearly we're not going to be able to do that. So I'm not saying that we're not going to be aspirational. We also have to be realistic. We know what we're up against.
So
Goals
for
with
the
a price
meeting,
tag.
so for the meeting on the 16th, we're going to have pretty much the same format. Their plans that you show, the three options are going to be developed a little bit further, but we're going to be talking about layouts. We're going to be talking about any comments that were made tonight that'll be added to it, square footages, and then the green engineer will be there for about, I think it's a 10-minute presentation for their slides, just to talk about a little bit more in detail what we just went through right now. So that's what's being shown on the 16th. So as Merrill mentioned earlier, we're not going to have cost numbers at, estimates at that point. We'll have them for the 23rd potentially, but for the 16th we will not. And we can certainly address that, saying that they're being undertaken right now. So that we're not, you're not going to see anything else from us until the 16th. So if everybody's good or has any other questions about what was shown tonight or can add any other comments, please reach out to us. Steve Venuti? Oh, you're
Muted.
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 Sorry. Two things. I think Steve had mentioned comparing the 93,000 square feet and the 97,000 square feet back to the 85. I don't think the 85 is really meaningful to people. That they saw a different number. They saw the 103,
Right.
whatever it was.
Mm.
Maybe the good comparison is what the difference is between the 94 and the 97, between the ad reno and the reno. What caused that building to increase by 3,000? So we know the gym is a big piece of it, I guess. Maybe something like that shows it, or what the reductions were from the original back down. But I think the 85 is kind of meaningless right now to people. From what
It's
they
a new
saw.
number,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or we'd have to tell the story, I think, a little bit more. It's meaningful to Kelly, and Mary Lee and Michelle, because they've been talking about those numbers of like, that's the number we absolutely can't go below. So I think that the story could be told, but I agree what you're saying. We have to do it at a pace to bring the folks who haven't been watching the movie these last several weeks. Well, you had another point?
I do. When are we going to start talking about what is going to be presented at town meeting?
Volunteers.
Is that on this agenda for the 23rd? Well, we need to talk about that because this is the first time the community is going to be hearing this.
It's a great point, Steve.
Let's put it on the agenda.
We're making two presentations within a week, the 16th and the 23rd, and on the 29th is the meeting, correct? So I think information that we get from both of those meetings, we can compile whatever we need to compile and modify whatever we need to modify. And I think it'll be roughly the same type of presentation, but we will have numbers. So we'll show the evolution of where the plans are, where the square footages are. We'll have cost estimates back. We can talk about sustainability issues or whatever, but if we have 10 minutes at the town meeting, we can certainly talk about what needs to be presented. And if we need to have a interim meeting with this group just to make sure everybody, likes what they see, we can certainly do that too.
Yeah, I think this is
that only gives us 3 days, right? Between
Yeah, the 23rd to the
Yeah.
29th, we'll leave a lot of time, right?
6 days. Okay.
Couldn't we start the conversation at the 16th though? Sort of the tail end,
Mm-hmm.
kind of
Could
to
be.
say,
Yeah.
start the conversation of what we might present to get everybody's take in the room. And then we do it again on the 23rd and then
Exactly. Yeah.
Put a straw man together. Yeah.
Is the 16th in person or hybrid? I believe it's both.
Both.
Or
They're
okay.
both. They're both.
So Green Engineer is actually going to be hybrid, just so everybody knows. Do we have longer than an hour?
I'm
For
sure
what?
it will be.
Yeah, you can. If Steve has to leave, I can take over. Ryan can assist as well. So
Or,
I think
or
it was
even on the 16th? I mean, today would be lovely too, because there are some things that we do need to cover, but how about on the 16th? What are we structuring that meeting towards? An hour?
well, I would
minutes.
say a little longer because we're really going to
Mhm.
need to listen to the audience as well. I mean, these presentations
Please.
are essential, but I think what's missing at this point in time is that two-way dialogue, and we need to bring more people along with us. So if it's 90 minutes, that's fine or whatever.
Mhm.
Just so we can set expectations.
Well, how long was the first one?
Right.
Felt like 2 hours, but
2.5 hours, yeah. I mean, which is great if people are allowed, they want to have conversations and everything, but I think minimum 90 minutes if it goes beyond, so be it. All right, we get the 5-minute warning for
And then my
Mr.
last
Moore.
question. Okay, my last question about the 16th is, does this group need to reconvene to get our story straight and I think it's straight amongst us, but just making sure, I know for the 21st, there was a meeting before to kind of go through a narrative. Do we have the opportunity for that before the 16th?
I
To go
can
through the
make a
narrative.
suggestion.
Yeah.
So this presentation, based on the comments that you've made, I would say it's like 90% there. So I think that we should make it our goal to have this presentation updated and sent to you on Friday, give you the weekend to absorb it. And then Monday or potentially Tuesday, we have a phone call with like 1 or 2 of you. So it's not violating public meeting laws, just to make absolutely sure before we do our final presentation.
Love it. All right. Do we want to find a time next week then, or we can circle back and
let's
do that?
let's arrange that later. What
Yeah.
what else do we
All
have to talk about
So
tonight?
2 things very quick. Community outreach update. The subcommittee now has, I believe, 6 additional people outside of the subcommittee on this group that are involved, and they have a really strong list started, brainstorming of things that can be done, and some of them are being put into place already. And then the other thing is a frequently asked questions section for the website. We have a pretty solid draft that we've been working with TTH to develop. I'm doing a final look through of it, and then we're going to pass it along to all of you by email to get feedback from you. And hopefully we can have that live on the website before the 16th. The other thing I want to talk about is, because we have the landscape architect drawings and we're developing the plans, I think we need to have another meeting of the site selection and design subcommittee. And in the past, we had been doing those on the every other Wednesday night. So if we could schedule that one potentially for next Wednesday evening, that would be helpful.
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right, 7:58. Any other?
Just a quick comment. It would be very helpful, and Steve Venuti, if you have some advice to give me, please give it to me. One of the things that we heard at our last meeting was the cost, the sticker price, and I would really like to know, and I kind of have not an actual cost, but the senior center. If we looked at the senior center square footage and the cost of that building, I would venture to guess that if we did a proportional cost, it wouldn't be any different in terms of cost per square foot of what we're talking about. And I think that's important for our public to know that this project is going on right now, and the costs that we're talking about are definitely in line with that current project. Any context that we can bring to this process, I think, is going to be really important.
I think Fred has always quoted that the senior center is close to $1,000 a square foot.
Yeah, and it's apples and oranges too. It's a school versus a senior center. So the programming, the scope is completely different. We do have, I did get some information last week from another project that's concurrently going on in the town of Burlington, the Fox Hill Elementary School. And that's a K-5 school with 325 students, 90,000 square feet. It's coming in at $882 a square foot. So they're looking at a construction cost of 80 million, a project cost of just a little over 100. So that's a comparison. We had numbers from Florence Roach too. So I mean, we can get to the MSBA and pull up additional information and show what's going on. Because I think when we get those cost estimates next week or the week after, I think you're going to still see those numbers up there. Because I don't think we're seeing the numbers drop precipitously.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good point to try to cost comparison. Bob, sorry, I think I jumped in front of you. What do you got?
I just wanted, is the Whitcomb Field an absolute dead issue now?
It's not on the plate.
Could be.
Not on the plate.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not on the table.
There-
Yeah, it's
There's
not.
been some rumors around that we should have all the schools all in one area, and the traffic problem down there.
Need a
would be
bigger
probably-
area.
The frequently asked questions that we're working
Yeah.
on for the website has a long section about Wickham Field.
Yeah, and I think as that
We're
gets
supposed to
developed,
review that.
We started the draft. Mark contributed to it, and now I'm taking one last spin through it, and then we're going to pass it along by email to all of you to look at it independently.
Great. And then it can go live pretty soon.
Mr. Venuti?
My last question is, have we heard back from MSBA on what we submitted to them?
We
No.
have not.
We have not.
And I'm calling Robin every other day. She's going to report me as a stalker. I try her Monday, Wednesday, Friday. She let us know something a while ago, which I didn't know. They changed the requirements. They put for the modular 3, they updated in July of 24. They did have 21 days to respond. They got rid of that requirement. So they don't have
Of course.
they have us required 14 days to respond to their comments, but they left theirs open-ended. So we're hoping to get it soon. It can't affect what we're doing for PSR. We're on schedule. We're on schedule to get everything in for the PSR on time for when it has to be submitted. And when we get PDP comments, we'll respond to the PDP comments as required. A lot of projects that I've worked on, some of the comments you can answer saying answered in PSR. Like a lot of the things get added later if they're not covered in PDP. So, but the answer is we haven't heard from them yet, and they don't know exactly when we're going to see them.
I think maybe why Steve's asking is that sort of reimbursement angle. And I wondering, have you ever been successful, Mark? And we're happy to jump on the asking if you'd like, to get like a portion of the comments.
No, never.
They want to do it all at one time. They're not going to give us
one shot. Yeah, it's one shot. And I mean, it's taken so long. She did say to me the day that I dropped it off, or the week after we spoke, that they had 2 or 3 PDPs come in at the same time, and the groups are looking at them. Hopefully, there'll be minor comments. I think it was a pretty good document, but we'll address it once we get to them. But we're going to parallel task here. We're going to continue on with PSR. We're going to focus on the things we need to do to get that done. Schedule-wise, we're right on top of it, so things are going well in that regard. So we're at 8:03. Is there any other questions or comments? I mean, did we want to try to set a time to? Oh, you already said meet with a few people just to talk about what's going to be shown on the 16th. Okay.
Yeah, just reach out to us. We can arrange
Okay.
that.
All right.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank the presenters tonight. Very, very great, good presentations.
Thank you.
and very meaningful to us and great conversation. So thank you.
Thank you all too.
All right, 8:04. Sorry, Steve, we went a little over.
That's all right. Any other comments, questions?
Now, Ryan, for the next meeting on the 16th, that will be a typical, review and accept, approve meeting minutes, approve invoices. Even though it's a
Correct.
joint meeting, I'm assuming it's our meeting and the other groups are invited to that meeting. So we'll have that because that's kind of the middle of the
Yeah, we
month.
can do that as we'll try to do that very quickly in the beginning.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes. Okay.
Okay,
All right, great.
is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
moved.
I don't know who made the motion, but somebody did. Is there a second?
Second it. Bob Romley.
Okay, roll call vote, Bob,
Bob Romley, yes.
Steve?
Stephen Udy, yes.
Let's see, did Stacy leave? Ryan?
Yes.
Kelly?
Ollie Clancy, yes.
Mike?
Mike Scaduto, yes.
And Steve Moore, yes.
Before you leave, Michelle Kane is here and I failed to promote her. She'd like to say something, so sorry about that. My fault.
Go ahead.
You
Oh,
muted.
Michelle.
Joe?
Michelle, you there?
I didn't want to say anything. I just wanted to say yes. I didn't know if you needed my vote for yes, but it looked like.
Yes, I just didn't see it down there.
Kelly and Steve, I'm like, I'm here, but I don't think I was let in as the right person.
I
So
know, Michelle, that was my
Yeah,
fault.
no
so-
one can hear you. Yeah.
Did you get to hear us?
I heard the whole meeting.
Okay.
Yep. But I knew we had a quorum, but I was like, if you need my vote, I vote yes.
Great.
Come on, Michelle. Come on, Michelle. We always
Thank
need
you.
you. Come on now.
Okay. Have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Right.
Bye-bye. Let's see how the hell I get out of here.
Ryan,